My name is Brenda Verduzco-Portillo. I'm a senior associate at a law firm handling labor and employment matters. One of the accomplishments I'm most proud of is having represented the state of California in federal court in defense against a federal regulation that threatened to deny women the access of abortion coverage. And this federal regulation was issued by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. It would have made it really complicated for consumers to receive certain bills that included abortion coverage, to pay for those bills, and it would have made it extremely onerous and financially impossible for health plans to provide that coverage to individuals in states like California. And it really, the purpose of the regulation was to make it nearly impossible or financially burdensome for health plans to operate in states like California that really went out of their way to protect reproductive rights. So I'm really proud to have defended against that regulation and argued in federal court, securing a motion for summary judgment in favor of the state and essentially vacating that federal regulation. So I'm really proud of that. It was in high school that I decided to pursue a career in law, primarily because I wanted to understand more about my status as an undocumented immigrant. At that point, I was undocumented. My family and I came to this country from Mexico. I was born in Mexico and immigrated here at a young age. Having gone through an educational system in California, it was not until high school that I understood what the limitations of being undocumented were and what my professional career would look like because of my undocumented status. So I was motivated by a desire to find clarity about my status for me and my family, but also to find clarity for other people whose lives are dictated by the way in which certain laws operate around them. And so, as I said, having grown up with that experience of being undocumented, I really saw the world through that lens. And when I was in undergraduate school, I took a class called Comparative Constitutional Law, which studied constitutions around the globe. And I took we learned about the South African Constitution, which is one of the most progressive constitutions in the world. It seeks to focus on creating gender equality, and it even uses terms that are gender neutral throughout the Constitution, which I thought was really interesting because the Constitution that I've been familiar with was the U.S. Constitution, which has terms like he, him, his, and very clearly outlines who we're talking about here that was going to have the power and ability to shape the federal government and the different branches that we are, meant to operate or live under. And so that really crystallized for me the fact that, law can look very different, and law can shape the way in which we live in a very real way, and kind of solidified for me my desire to learn more and be a part of that profession. So I come from a family that, as I mentioned, were immigrants from Mexico, and my parents both come from low income background, low educational attainment. They both have a elementary school education, and with that came limited opportunities for employment in this country. They worked in the fields, picking produce in agricultural fields, doing day laboring work, working in factories. And so much of my family and my extended family worked in a lot of low-income jobs. So my desire to pursue a professional degree was not only vastly different from mine and my extended family's experience, but also difficult to understand or comprehend, and also difficult to understand the pathway to get there. So it was very distinct, but I think that it was my family's background that really propelled my desire even further to go beyond what my parents knew and hopefully bring more of my community with me. I didn't grow up with lawyers around the dinner table, and I think that as I was going through the decision of seeking a legal career, applying to law school, studying for the LSATs, and getting rejection letters or acceptance letters. It was like we were all learning at the same time, and it really was a little bit of the blind leading the blind with how do we move forward to the next step, how do we apply and submit a strong personal statement. I think that if anything, my family's support throughout that process, although, we didn't have a handbook of how to get there, was really critical and sort of, reinforced more my desire to have that kind of profession be a part of our family too. I didn't have role models that were attorneys or were part of a legal career, but I had, an incredible family that supported me throughout that decision. And I also sought out support networks while I was in law school, mostly gravitated around students who also did not know, what the legal field could look like, or who also didn't have any other attorneys in their families. And I really relied heavily on student organizations at Loyola that were, La Raza, the IMLS, the Immigration Law Society. I was blessed to be a part of the Summer Institute program that helped at least give me or get my feet wet before the school year started to learn more about what we could expect during the academic year. I also, took advantage of other organizations that focus on women in the law, the Women's Law Association, including the Latina Lawyers Bar Association. And those were organizations that were really pivotal in helping me think of opportunities in the law that were not obvious or apparent to me, within our course study in law school. And I think that was really critical because I think that then that sort of multiplied my experiences, that sort of opened the doors to other experiences that I may not have otherwise considered. And also, they were great networks to sort of have camaraderie around the difficult aspect of what was law school. And so they had a huge impact on my journey because I used them as a source of support, as a source of network for job hunting, and a source of empowerment. My exposure to the legal field, as I mentioned, was very limited. I think that I thought of lawyering as in the traditional setting. I thought of lawyering as an individual standing before a judge, arguing a case before the jury. And it's really been eye-opening to discover, even after law school, the multitude of ways that you could lawyer. And I really have loved that. And I wish that I knew more of that when I initially started my law journey. As I mentioned, I definitely was exposed to a lot more opportunities while I was in law school, through other groups and organizations, but law school really opened my eyes to the various ways in which you could be a lawyer. You could, be a court clerk. You could be a career court clerk. You could be a professor. You could do so many other things than that traditional lawyering style that I thought was what a lawyer meant. And I think that one of the fears that I had when I joined law school was that I thought that I had to pursue career opportunities that had something to do with my background or experience, my personal background or experience. And I think that going to law school opened my eyes to the fact that you could really pursue anything you were interested in law school, because it was what you were being taught had such broad applications. So one of the things that I thought that needed to be true for me specifically was that I thought, because I was an immigrant and I came from an immigrant background and struggled as an undocumented immigrant, I thought that I had to, for some reason, do immigration work. And while I did do the Immigration Justice Clinic and learned a lot and met incredible people and represented incredible clients, I found that it wasn't the only thing that I could do, and it was okay for me to have other interests beyond my own personal experience. And so I wish that I would have taken more business association courses or administrative procedure uh, uh, courses, things that I didn't think I would have been interested in, and that now I spend a lot of my practice in. So, some of the challenges that I faced while going to law school were, quite frankly, digesting the large volume of material. The reading was extensive. A lot of it was complicated English, or English that wasn't common to, Latin, and the ways in which judges tend to write that is very convoluted. It was hard for me to understand what I needed to focus on, what was important, and what was not. And I think that the volume of case law that was assigned um, made it difficult to feel like I could get through it and then have a solid understanding of what we were attempting to be taught. I overcame those challenges by relying on my friend group and our support network. A lot of us that went to the Summer Institute program stayed close. Some of us became lifelong friends. And I would share my concerns about like the reading or how lost I would feel with my friends. And that helped me understand that there were other resources available beyond the case law books that could sharpen my understanding of whatever principle we were studying. Or the fact that there were resources that could supplement these case law books was as simple as that was helpful in preparing for the midterm exam or the final exam. So really relying on my circle of friends and my circle of of groups and organizations that provided study hours and made it more welcoming to spend all of those hours, long hours at the library. One of the strategies that worked for me, that was effective for me, was independent studying. I needed to get comfortable with the material enough on my own to then be comfortable to talk about it. I know that a lot of students do study groups. For me, being in a study group and being around people while I was studying, I don't know, was a little overwhelming. But something that was effective for me was doing that during a break, whether it was for dinner or for lunch, getting together with friends or a study group to then discuss the issues and questions or go through fact patterns and analyze them. During that time, I could balance my academic responsibilities with other aspects of my life because I didn't live at home. And so I had the privilege of having distance from my family who might otherwise count on me for certain responsibilities. And so I tried to compartmentalize my day around courses, class, and studying. Although, the study strategies change over time, and I got better at balancing that with internships and other extracurricular activities. I found that by year two, middle of year two, that extracurricular activities were also not a distraction, but helped me be more rounded and put less pressure on me having my head in a case law book, and really made it more manageable. I think the large amount of work became somehow more manageable the more I became involved in other organizations and other events around the law school. Did I experience imposter syndrome? Absolutely. I still do. I think that it's been eye-opening for me to realize that I'm not the only person that is experiencing that imposter syndrome. I've spoken with executives who have told me I still experience imposter syndrome as a woman in a position of chief at the Department of Justice. And so how I dealt with it is, I learned to ignore it. I learned to stop thinking about it because I never wanted to focus on the fears that I had about myself, because at the end of the day, that was not serving me. And it sounds simple to say to ignore it, but I want to say that I definitely felt it. I sort of learned how to live with it. And I think that that's the most you could do, because I think that as we move up in our careers, especially for individuals who are first in their family, it's not going to go away until you kind of get used to having that sort of extra concern or worry. If it's not going to go away, I just want to make sure that it doesn't sort of limit me without me wanting it to. So the bar exam. My experience preparing for the bar exam was difficult. I think, quite frankly, it was not until the first round of bar exam prep. I say first round because I failed the bar the first time. I did not pass. But when I took the bar prep course, I went through all of the sessions provided and followed that outline. And it was when everything started to click for me. But it wasn't an opportunity that I had to really crystallize or refine my understanding of these legal concepts and principles. I was sort of playing catch up, I think, even up until the bar prep course. And it was difficult because I was still resolving for myself issues that I had that weren't clear to me in law school. So I did not pass the bar the first time, and I think it was in large part because I was not focusing on the exam portions that I was weakest at. I was still sort of focusing on the content and making sure that I had the content right. The second time that I took the bar, I had to prepare, but now my preparation was much more focused on the actual style of exam taking. Like, what I needed to focus on was the MBE portion. I was really good at essay prompts and writing an essay and analyzing and issue spotting and making an argument, I think, in written form. I think it was more difficult when I was posed with an objective question that I had to find the right answer to, and I didn't spend enough time, I think, the first time around, analyzing the ways in which all the other questions were wrong or could not be right. And so spending more time on the things that I needed to personally get better at, whether it was reading the prompt of the question faster and answering faster and moving along, not being nervous about like picking the right or wrong answer, but getting through that portion fast enough was something that I could only do after I had that first experience where everything kind of was synthesized in my brain legally. Everything made sense. So it was difficult, but I think that one of the most effective strategies was really focusing on what I needed and not necessarily, because I think that the Barbary prep course offers you all the tools you may need, but I think ultimately it's up to you, the test taker, to take what you need and either do more of and do less of what you already know you're strong at. How I navigated the period between taking the bar exam and receiving my results. I would recommend that you distract yourself after you take the bar. Take care of yourself. This was the second time I took the bar, and I think I was very demoralized by not having passed the first time. I went through a very tough period mentally and emotionally, having felt like I let a lot of people down. And so the second time, I thought that I really gave it my all. I was working while I was studying for the bar, and I felt like I gave it a lot of my energy and time and would have been devastated if I had not passed the second time. So I think it was really critical for me to spend the time while I waited for results with family, with friends, doing things I enjoy, because at the end of the day, I had given it all I had and had to trust that that was going to, come out in positive results for me. So I would just recommend you distract yourself, because you can definitely take yourself down a lot of black holes, trying to plan for an outcome that you don't even know what it is yet. So on career path, my first job after the bar exam, I worked as a contract attorney, helping a law firm reviewing documents that were submitted to the FCC for mergers and acquisitions. It was sort of very, monotonous work of reviewing documents for privilege and creating privilege logs, but I learned a lot. And it was after that I had the opportunity to come back to California. At that time, I was working in Washington, D.C. I came back to California and joined the Department of Justice as a Deputy Attorney General and worked in a healthcare strike force. That's when I had the opportunity to focus on healthcare regulation and challenge a lot of the regulations that were threatening individuals' access to affordable quality healthcare. I've also worked for the federal government. I worked for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, helping draft federal regulations that are impacting all of the healthcare centers across the country. And these are non-discrimination protections for the Office of Civil Rights within the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. And there, I essentially helped review a bunch of comments that are submitted by stakeholders, patients, providers, and other government agencies about how a rule should function or work or how it doesn't work, and then generating responses on behalf of the agency that will eventually be published in the Federal Register and become law that is applicable across healthcare programs and healthcare centers across the country. And that was a really cool role to be exposed to. Now, as a labor and employment attorney, I handle workplace investigations and help in employment matters that are litigated or mediated and arbitrated. And there I provide advice and counsel to clients in both public entity settings, so organizations like cities, universities, as well as private clients. I think that the skill and experience that has been most successful or most valuable to me as an attorney have been the ability to research, to do it efficiently, and be effective in creating your own outline for whatever problem you're trying to solve, and then the ability to practical problem solve. And I say practical problem solve because a lot of the times you'll have clients that want to get from point A to point B, and often it may not necessarily be the research that they care most about or the legal analysis. While it is, yes, important, I think it's helpful to remember that as an attorney, you're problem solving, whether it's a timing issue, whether it's a legal brief. The client is seeking to get from point A to point B, and I think that my experience as, quite frankly, an undocumented student and an undocumented individual navigating a system of laws that really made it difficult for me to get from point A to point B, that ability to be a problem solver has been the most valuable to my success as an attorney. I don't have a set plan of what comes next. I've learned to rely on my experience in trying to expand what that could mean for me in my professional life. I want to continue to keep growing and keep building on the tools that I have on my tool belt. I think that litigation experience at the Department of Justice was incredible. The advice and counsel work I get here at the law firm has also been eye-opening. And I'm now focusing on diversifying the skill sets that I bring to the table as an attorney, and I hope that in the near future I can continue to add to that. The advice I would give future law students is honestly a little basic and cheesy, but I really think that you have to believe in your capabilities to problem solve. I think that more often than not, it's likely that you have faced bigger problems in your life before, especially if you come from an underrepresented group. So I think that it's helpful to remember that. And I have had trouble remembering that. So I would say this to you now is that having graduated law school, having not passed the bar, and then having passed the bar, having represented the state of California and done amazing things that I never could have imagined to have done as an undocumented person trying to think of how do I get to law school when I was in high school, I think it's important to remember that all of these are just, steps and milestones in your long trajectory of the wonderful things you'll do. And you should think of it as a lengthy fact pattern. And every situation is, okay, how do I get around that problem? So believe in yourself, believe in your capabilities and your ability to problem solve because you've already done that. Lastly, I'll say that any lessons or insights that I can give you that I wish I had known earlier. Okay, so I would say that as a law student today, you should take advantage of the opportunities that are available to you, but specifically those opportunities that you may not naturally gravitate to. And I say that because for me, as I mentioned earlier, I felt that as an undocumented immigrant, as a Mexican immigrant, someone that came from a very low income background, I felt that I had to do certain things, whether it was pursuing public interest work or whether it was pursuing immigration advocacy. While all of those things are incredibly important and I've had really incredible experiences myself, they weren't the only things that I could pursue. And so I say, my insight to you would be to explore things that you may not think you are fit to pursue. I think that's really incredible. I often get asked by young Latinas and other young students of color, what should I explore? What should I pursue? And often I have individuals who have also come from an immigrant background and ask me about that, and their response is that they're inclined to do immigration work, which again is great. But I also want to remind them, remember that you could also do SEC work. You could also do tax law. You could also do all of these other things that are also equally important to the communities you're seeking to represent. And I say that only because at times I think that thinking of pigeonholing yourself, or putting yourself in a box of what opportunities you might be a good fit for, does yourself a disservice. And I think that I've learned that in my own career, where I, again, didn't imagine that I would be so attracted to administrative procedure law or some of these regulatory aspects of the healthcare work that I do, because I thought I would never have had that experience or never had anything to bring to the table, because that's not the circles that I operated in before law school. So I would highly, highly encourage everyone to take advantage of those opportunities, even things that you may not naturally gravitate to. Test yourself, encourage yourself to pursue things that you're not familiar with. I think that'll only make you a better lawyer in wherever you end up.